Good afternoon, Hot Springs. This is Big Ben and Company, Everything Sometimes. And today we're going to be talking with a local person who has been anything but local. He's been virtually international, and he's been all over the world in his work, which is as a designer for stages and for operas, for theater, for just about every kind of production in the theater that we could imagine. And we are so thrilled to have him here today. That is Milton. Milton, you want to say hello?
Well, good morning, or good afternoon, I guess it is by now.
It's afternoon.
Delighted to be here with you.
Well, are we on here now? We're recording. So we're listening to some music that we have here. We're going to be putting on a man that you may remember named Moondog. I don't know if you remember hearing him, but here he is. In the West, his father took him out to drum with the Indians where he was working on the reservation. He came back to Missouri and Arkansas. That's where he lost his sight, but he went to school here and then to New York City, where he met Toscanini and learned to compose symphonies. And that is Moondog. I have Milton here, who lived in New York City. Did you ever know Moondog, ever hear him or run into him in New York City?
Never ran into him. Certainly I know who he is.
Well, you know who he is. You actually saw him or heard of him?
Certainly heard of him.
Well, what I wanted to do was ask you about some of the many, many experiences you've had. The things that caught my attention as we were talking yesterday, just chatting, was that you are a person who believes that the simple is the best, and that when you have a production that you're planning for, you actually believe that by putting together certain elements on the stage, you can direct the actors and the director for the very thematic of the show. The thing that caught my attention mostly was the Thread of Scarlet. Was that the one we were talking about?
Well, that's one that we had talked about.
Yeah. And there you put shadows on the stage, right?
Well, if you take the play, which was done off-Broadway in New York City, if you take that play, you find that it is Victoria Woodhull it's a remembering play. So she is remembering all these incidents for us. So in all the places that she is remembering, the furniture, the architecture is all gone. So when she's remembering it, only possibly the shadows may still be there. And first of all, it was a technical difficulty to get that to work.
Well, because how does the audience see them? You have to be canted and looking down on the stage.
Well, that theater is a raked theater, R-A-K-E-D.
Raked.
And that refers to the fact that there is a slant to the floor.
All right.
Now, all Broadway theaters are raked.
Oh.
But they're not raked to an extraordinary degree. In this theater, this raked floor was about like sitting in bleachers. So everybody would be able to see the floor.
Wow.
They would be able to see the backdrop, which was all a collage of nylon nets piled on top of each other and paint thrown at it and everything else. So everybody was able to see the fact that this was Victoria Woodhull remembering these incidents.
Well, you know, it's amazing because I heard a lecture this morning, or talk this morning, about the truth, and it was delivered by Rabbi Gene Levy at the Village Unitarian Church, and he was talking about how in life we often only see the shadows of the thing we call truth, or the true beings, and this is, of course, what I mentioned to you, that the allegory of the cave with Plato, the great philosopher, one of the first philosophers, said, it's like we are in a cave and we see only the shadows down on the floor that are coming from the real true objects that are above the cave going through that hole. And this is an amazing...
Well, it was my perception in reading the play, because surely I am not nearly as smart as Plato, nor have I hoped to be, that this would be a way of heightening the theatricality and the drama of the written piece. So that was the result of developing the shadow system.
Well, another thing that you said to me was that you will often spend enormous amounts of time going over an idea again and again and again, sketching it out. And you said that if you were a lawyer, you'd probably be a pretty good lawyer because you get it down to distill it down to the most essential, very few elements. And you said that you look after all of these mistakes as a film director does for the take. Is that right?
Absolutely correct. You cannot get it right the first time you're thinking about it. Even after you see it and draw it and draw it and draw it, it may not be right. And in my business as a stage designer, I am sending drawings, just like an architect does. I'm sending drawings of scenery to other people to build it and to execute it, all to scale. So what I have to send is not about what I would like to see. It is exactly what I would like to see. And so doing those hundreds of drawings sometimes, piles and piles of tissue paper, you finally get to what really the curve needs to be, or how few pieces of furniture you can get away with, or where the actors should enter, and what the lighting should look like. So for me, it's an endless process, because even after the show opens, I still continue to work on it.
You told me that the placement of a chair can make a huge difference in the way the narrative and the dramatic movement is going in a play.
Well, what we're after, of course, is get the audience to experience the real drama or the atmosphere of the written material. So, and it could be one period chair. If the chair is exactly right, with the exact faded upholstery or torn upholstery, a single element could set the entire atmosphere for the piece.
Well, as you said, it tells what period it is in and what you have chosen to be representative of that period. And it's just like, as I mentioned in the films I worked in, the continuity person or script person had to make sure that everything was of that period. You can't have, say, a story about the Civil War and somebody wearing a wristwatch, for example.
That's correct.
Absolutely craziness.
Well, it's the situation is that my job as a scenery and a costume and a lighting designer is to tell the audience something immediately about what they're about to see, or to set some sort of mood for the audience, so that they are able to put themselves into the atmosphere of the written material. So that's the importance of working so hard on that single chair or a fireplace or a rug or an old coat hanging on a coat rack, and a single light bulb maybe just hanging from the ceiling as the lighting, because that tells the audience, it sets up everything for the audience.
Well, you used a couple of terms that I really latched onto them when you said you had to distill it down to what you felt was the essential. And of course, the distillate process, the distillate of the quintessential moment of the movement of alchemy, the transformation of dross material like lead to gold, that is called the elixir. And it is the distillate that makes all the difference and changes the entire atmosphere and being. And it's almost like the quark, which is the quantum leap in physics that you're talking about as well.
Well, the designer's obligation, and I can tell you most designers in our business, even those who have had success, don't really work as hard as they should to distill things. I mean, everything has a chair, a door frame, a table, a rug, has a personality. And to find that personality that you need to help the audience along, that's the distillation of everything. You know, to put it on paper and then to have somebody go and find it and then send it to the shop where the painters can work on it or reupholster it or do whatever they need to do. It sort of is an endless process for which I am sometimes, in my mind, never finished. Even after the production opens, I still have a book on every production I've ever done, and I continue to work and continue to work even after the show has closed.
You told me about, well, of course, it's amusing that I have worked in films and I've been around films and I know some of the people. It was amazing because I was talking about how many takes, it was 12 takes on a second unit work outside that I did in the last film I had a speaking part in called Nicholas and Alexandra, where I played the part of the Tsar, the aide to the Tsar, and a general, a Russian general, and I had to stand out on a train track in a freezing blizzard in the mountains of Spain and rush and jump over a cowcatcher as a locomotive screeched to a halt, and then I was to enter the car and tell the Tsar they're rioting in Moscow, what a rather key line in the film. And John Box was the second unit director, and he had me do as many as 12 runs, and on the last one I caught the sword between my legs and I was in excruciating pain, and he caught that all as I jumped up onto the train or to grab the train. And you said you had worked with him, that he was also a set designer, John Box.
A set designer that I admire greatly, and I remember him only from Oliver the movie. But
Amazing.
when you look at it, you will see the simplicity of line that he used to create the atmosphere. Of course, many of those characters in that movie were pretty surly, grumbly sort of people. So you got some of the atmosphere from the grime on their face and their straggly hair.
Well,
but take a look next time you have an opportunity to see it, and look at the sets and the detail that is in them. You know, none of this happens by accident. You know, it happens with a great deal of work, sometimes with hundreds of people to do the scenery.
I'm constantly rather sort of dismayed at some of the inaccuracies that I see, especially films that have to be, I'm an old Navy guy. I'm a guy who spent a lot of time at sea, and also I'm a blue water sailor, and I see things that are absolutely impossible to accept. But many of the people, I mean, the Captain Phillips film, I've been out in the Gulf of Aden with the NATO forces until just 2 years ago, chasing the Somali pirates, and I don't even want to begin to tell you the inaccuracies. But it's wonderful when you see a person who gets that distillate just right, that elixir, at that quintessential, which is the fifth step in alchemy, that moment, the quark, when it has a quantum leap into the real.
That's their obligation, to carry you away. And the times you have sort of lost consciousness in the theater or in a movie, completely sucked in to the film, they've done an extraordinary job between the actors and what you're seeing and the perfectly lit set. is all just perfect, and it's enchanting when you see it done wonderfully.
Well, I want to ask you about a person that I have long admired and thought of for a while only as an actor until I saw a film that he produced and directed called Richard III. It was the staging of Richard III, which is rather a difficult play because it's about a rather nasty king, the one who did an awful lot of, was very cruel.
Yeah.
And yet that was the first time I'd seen anything he directed, but you worked with him when he was a very young man down in the village directing a play called, was it Local Stigmatic?
Uh-huh.
And you did some, tell us, you called it moving rear projection. Could you tell us what that is and explain what that is that you did? And that was a long time ago, and nobody had ever done this before.
Well, I tell you, all these glimmers of originality come to me when I am trying to figure out how to include the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And in this instance, the Local Stigmatic, Al Pacino, was rather a harsh, really rough tale.
It's about two murderers, isn't it?
Of two murderers.
Yeah.
And the configuration to get the scenery to do what I wanted to was to find, through the set builders, optically perfect mirrors.
Ooh.
Because the stage was not deep enough to do rear projection.
Well, now tell us what rear projection is, again, for the people out there who can't, well,
Yeah.
see if we can explain what it is.
Oh, let me see if I can try. Rear projection is when an image is projected from behind the actors
Uh-huh.
onto a piece of scenery or a screen or some sort of textured material,
Mm-hmm.
and the audience then will see the image. So rear projection is rear to the audience, so that means that it is upstage,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't necessarily
It's
mean
behind
anything.
the actors,
It's behind the actors.
and you made it move.
And then we had all of those projection surfaces move sort of choreographed with each other so that they moved in the scenes and in between the scenes.
Wow.
I had one of the advantages of being the designer is that when the play closes years later, the producer will call you up and say, "What do you want out of the set?" And I said, I need a big mirror for my hall in New York.
Oh.
So I'd like one of those optically perfect mirrors. So they sent one over. So it was interesting.
I wanted to go on to another. You've told me about something that I found. Okay, I've been an actor, and I've acted on stage. I've been on the boards, and I've played the proscenium, where it's just the aisle upon aisle upon aisle of audience, and I've also played to the original Greek semi-amphitheater, semicircular, the same thing as the Senate and the House of Representatives has, and that's supposedly a very, very dynamic form. But I've also been in theater in the round, which I found very challenging, and you designed something with the ideas of theater in the round for a discotheque nightclub in Tokyo, was it?
Yeah. And
Tell us about that.
Well, it was sort of an odd situation.
It's very special.
Very
unique.
And it's in Osaka.
Oh, Osaka, not in Tokyo.
Immaterial.
It's in Japan.
I'm always looking for something that is original and is going to sort of take your breath away in its theatricality. And we found with the producers and the builders a sort of center island that connected 4 roads in Osaka.
4 roads that were all coming together at the same point, and this was in
Correct.
the center like a roundabout,
Exactly.
like a Roman roundabout.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This roundabout was square, but it didn't matter.
All right.
So I asked the architects if we could not do all the walls glass
Mm-hmm.
so that everybody on the dance floor would see traffic headlights coming at them constantly and then turning off either to the left. Actually, in this instance, they were turning to the left and continuing. So there were 4 sets of headlights coming at every dancer on the dance floor. And then when they got to certainly within 20 or 30 feet of the dance floor, they would turn out, all of the cars would turn off to the left. So interesting, but I'm always looking for what is going to be unusual and, in this instance, to scare the crap out of everybody.
Well, it gives a whole new meaning to living life in the fast lane. And I'm amazed because it's like I had a beautiful little Thunderbird, and I put a license plate on the front with the word weird, W-Y-R-D, which means destiny or fate. And if I was driving at you with my Thunderbird coming at about 90 miles an hour, you'd see your fate or destiny coming at you. But that is a remarkably, I mean, it probably was successful, was it not?
Well, and it still is in business.
Wow.
So as far as I know, nobody's called me up and said, hurry back to help us with another one. So
I want to also ask you about, okay, you've done quite a few theaters in the round. The Goober Ford Gross Theater Owners, is that the name of it, or what was it called?
that's it. Those were 4 men.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember all of their first names now.
Well, that doesn't matter, but
They owned and put together a conglomerate of round theaters.
Of theater in the round theater.
Theater in the round.
Mm-hmm.
And there were approximately 40 of them.
40 theaters?
Yep.
You said they were called Star Productions.
And they were all they were movie star productions.
Oh.
Things like, the popular things.
Mm-hmm.
And the audience will not buy a ticket to something they don't know. So we did My Fair Lady.
Mm-hmm.
We did Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
We did that usual run of musicals that everybody knows.
I believe I saw the performance of My Fair Lady in that one of those. It was one of the first times I'd seen a real big production of theater in the round.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, it's amazing that if you do Oklahoma this season,
Mm-hmm.
and you do Oklahoma next season,
Mm-hmm.
and you do Oklahoma the next season,
Mm-hmm.
a single person will buy 3 tickets
Yeah.
to that ever.
Mm-hmm.
So
When I first went to England a long time ago, many years ago, and told people I was from Oklahoma, it was one of the first big hits in the theater on the West End in London, and I think it had the longest run of any particular musical comedy ever.
right.
And it was even, okay, this is kind of a very strange, this program is called Big Ben and Company. When I had this program in Spain, and Ray Charles came to give a concert, and I did an interview with him before the concert, he went out on stage and said, I'm going to dedicate this concert to my friend Ben, and I'm going to do a yodeling version of Oh, What a Beautiful Morning from
Oh, my
Oklahoma,
goodness.
because that's where my friend is from. I couldn't believe it. And he did a yodeling version of Oh, What a Beautiful Morning. But I'm from Oklahoma, and of course I'm so amazed that you mentioned that. Now, it's curious because I saw that production of My Fair Lady, which is a wonderfully dynamic program, in California, and that's where I played in theater in the round. And I think I mentioned I played the male lead in a play in which I was Professor Bradford Winter, a drug-addicted, alcoholic, ex-convict serial killer of little old ladies, and I had Solomon Bozo was my henchman. Henchperson is the politically correct term for that. And he was Norbert Ehrenfreund, but he was a Superior Court judge trying a murder case at the time. And so we both left the show after a few months because it was beginning to get to us. One scene I had to do was it was an assault, a sexual assault scene of one of the women in the play, and I had to perform it on a kind of a cot that was right in front of where her husband and 2 sons, whom I had taught in high school, who were on the football team, sat. And I apologized to them before the play and after the play.
Yeah,
But wow, you're really right in the middle of the soup there.
Yeah, I tell you something.
Yeah, that's why you're here. Tell me something.
Keeping that kind of intensity is physical work beyond all recognition. I mean, it is exhausting.
It is.
And it's exhausting every time you do it, and you don't get used to it. And the intensity that you have to maintain to make that convincing to the audience is as exhausting as running 100 miles.
Well, the man I saw who was one of the most perfect athletes I've ever known was Jack Palance, and he was my student. I was his teacher and dialogue coach. And the film was originally called The Marauders, and then it was later called The Desperados. And he and Vince Edwards and George Maharis, but Jack was a physical phenomenon. He had been a heavyweight boxer, and he worked out all the time. And when he performed his scenes of violence, but I remember once we were about to do a scene, and there were some people who had come to the set, and they had their children, and he went over and said to the family, I want your children to know this is just make-believe. And what I'm going to be doing is just make-believe. I'm just going to be playing a big, scary guy. But frankly, that sort of a role does get to a person. I know Tony Hopkins rather well. And after Hannibal Lecter, well, maybe I shouldn't say this, but it has a really daunting effect on people.
Absolutely.
And that's why I don't, this is the only way I perform, is inviting people like you to tell me what you know about it. But theater, life is a stage, and we are on stage. And you said that we both agree we would both love to have, the only play I've ever directed was a musical comedy version of Noah's Ark. It was written by an Anglican priest. That's our version of the Episcopalian, who was visiting in California, and I got to know him there. And I directed that play and produced that play with a group of 10-year-olds in the 4th grade at La Jolla Country Day School, and it was marvelous. And you said that your dream is to direct and produce a play, maybe for children, and to write a children's book. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well,
we were talking about Little Prince and all kinds of things.
It's time for me to step ahead from just being a designer. If you are a professional designer in New York or anywhere else, you do all the work that a director does anyway to get to where you are with the scenery. So I've done that kind of directorial work and staging to develop a workable set for the director anyway. So it's time for me to step ahead and become a director and design the projects. The most intense way you can get the drama out of a piece if all the ideas come from one person. Things don't get diluted, and things get to be wonderfully intense. So I am happy to step ahead. I am in the process of, and I don't know how big a secret this is, of writing a opera based on Stone Soup.
What?
It's a wonderful tale of con artist, but it's also a children's fairy tale.
But you said it's based on Stone Soup. I don't know the reference.
Yeah.
The allusion. What is it?
Well, let me tell you as briefly as I can.
Well, you can elaborate because it sounds fascinating to me, and I think our audience is learning as much as I am. I mean, this is for me a great learning experience. Please elaborate.
The enchanting quality of this is that people don't realize that it's a bunch of con artists working. But the war is over, and there are 3 soldiers heading home, and they're all dusty, and their uniforms are ragged and everything, and they're desperately hungry. And in a town that they're about to come to, the mayor figures out that these 3 soldiers are coming to town, and he knows that they're going to be hungry and are going to eat up everything in town. So the mayor then decides that everybody in town, and he announces to everybody, to hide all the food from a very prosperous season in the fields, so that the army characters do not come in and want to eat, and we eat all the produce and everything. So the mayor convinces everybody to hide all the produce and to put on their worst poor clothes, so that the three officers think that they are desolate.
Ah.
So anyway, the three officers, soldiers, get to town, and everything is bleak.
Everything is what?
Bleak.
Bleak.
The
Barren, bleak, empty.
The shutters are all closed on the houses and everything. So they find one of the men, one of the farmers in the street, and they tell him that they're very hungry and they would love something to eat. When the character from the town says what a terrible time the farming has been, there's no food in town for them and everything, the three officers then get their heads together and they ask for the mayor. The mayor comes out, and they invite everybody from the village to come into the square, and the three soldiers announce that they are going to make stone soup.
Stone soup. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they say all we need is a big pot and water, and we need to build a fire under it. And one of the soldiers says, I'm going to go around and I'm going to select 3 perfect stones, 3 perfect rocks, and we're going to make for you stone soup. And so everybody in town is captured by the idea, how in the world are you going to make stone soup?
It sounds like a reverse of that whole parable about Jesus being out in the wilderness and being told to turn the stone to bread, but
Yep.
go on.
And anyway, so the pot comes and the fire is under the pot and the water is boiling, and the soldier has selected these 3 perfect boulders. So he brings them in and he drops one at a time into the boiling water kettle. And they're stirring it, and they're stirring it, and they're stirring it. And they keep peering into the kettle and stirring and stirring. And one of the soldiers said, you are going to love this soup. The only thing that could make this soup better is if we had a few carrots to put in it. So then all of a sudden one of the citizens goes to their house and they bring back 3 carrots. So they're stirring this pot of boiling water with 3 carrots and 3 stones in it. And one of the soldiers says, oh, wait till you taste this stone soup. The only thing that could make this better is if you had 3 turnips to put in this soup.
All right. How many more vegetables do they put in, by the way? Huh?
They get a full vegetable soup done, and the entire town is still convinced and amazed that it is stone soup.
Oh, I love it.
And it's a wonderful, charming little tale. And I have gotten the outline done, and I've gotten about half of the outline developed to a point that it's ready to raise money.
Well, now, you told me you had done some work over in Pine Bluff, in the theater over there. Did you do some design for them, or have you worked with them on some of their productions? Would it be over there, or where would it be performing? Would it be Little Rock, or here?
What, the opera?
This particular, is that sufficient for an opera house in Pine Bluff?
No.
So it would have to be in Little Rock.
No, this I think this kind of opera would most definitely have to go to the imagination of the Santa Fe Opera.
To the Santa Fe, where you started originally, did you not?
I did.
How old were you when you started in Santa Fe?
I was almost 17 years old.
Wow.
I walked into that theater in a black and white checked suit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was little teeny checks. It was the most awful thing you've ever seen in your life.
I used to wear things like that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I met with the technical director, then Bob Benson, and I said to him, I'm a designer, and I'm here for a job.
Mm-hmm.
And unbeknownst to me, they hired me.
Wow.
I was the only one who didn't know I didn't know anything.
Then that's a perfect way to start learning.
Well, and that's exactly what I did.
It's wonderful. I love it.
Yeah. And I was assigned a couple of productions over 3 years and managed to get them on stage to some form of success. But the third season I was there, Rudolf Heinrich, the very famous German director, was there to do Lulu, the Alban Berg opera.
Mm-hmm.
And he then took me to Germany to design over there
Oh, gosh.
for a little while. So anyway, Santa Fe is absolutely the most wonderful time of my life.
Well, Santa Fe is, for me, magic. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains, I was out there from the time I was 11 years old, and I always go out to those same beautiful mountains. And my best friend, well, the teacher, Francis Bloodgood, started a prep school there to go with the college that was built there. That was part of the Annapolis, Maryland Special College and University. It's a very magic place. I mean, well, that's the symbol of New Mexico, is the magic of New Mexico.
Right,
Well, now, you were also, how long were you in Europe? Were you in Europe many years?
Well, I was there on and off because Heinrich was directing some things here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would go over and we would work together on the designs, and I would come back. Then he...
But you've also been back and forth across the Atlantic with the Cunard lines too.
Well,
so you've really breached every kind of dimension here, didn't you? Weren't you on the Queen Elizabeth II for the 150th anniversary of the Cunard line?
Absolutely. I designed so many projects for that project.
Amazing.
It was one of the biggest celebrations ever, and it was stage shows, it was concerts, it was Las Vegas shows.
You said you had everybody from Ella Fitzgerald to Bob Hope. Wow.
And Smothers Brothers.
And the Smothers Brothers, good heavens.
And the London Symphony, and just everybody you could think of. It was
amazing.
A once-in-a-lifetime celebration for Cunard steamships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And oddly enough, I had worked many years prior to that that had no connection to the 150th anniversary with a very famous actress, Beatrice Straight, who won an Oscar for some movie. And her family had owned Cunard steamships.
Oh, good heavens.
And
that's rather amazing.
It was very impressive.
Rather an asset, what?
Yeah. Oh, she won an Oscar, I think, for Network.
Oh.
And that, I could be wrong about that. But anyway, this was one of the most extraordinary events for the British government. And they finally admitted in a post-production meeting that they were so glad that they hired an American production company to do this.
Mm-hmm.
With these dozens of shows on the ship and on land, because they felt that British companies couldn't organize a thing like this to succeed. And it was an amazing experience.
Well, you know, there's so many things that I don't want to leave untouched. You worked with the Metropolitan Opera in America and with the Kennedy Center, the Lincoln, all of these. Could you just, there are an amazing number of people, but you also were a professor at Bernard College and at Columbia University.
Yes. My life has been a series of happy accidents.
That's lovely. Could you define and explain and elaborate on that?
I'm about to tell you.
Good.
The third year that I was at Santa Fe Opera, there was a production stage manager, Bill Nix. Bill Nix, unbeknownst to me, was the head of the Metropolitan Opera Studio.
Mm-hmm.
The Metropolitan Opera Studio was a production arm of the Metropolitan Opera that was a training facility. The Metropolitan Opera could see down the road the voices that they were going to be missing as they did main stage productions at the opera company.
Mm-hmm.
So they started a company to train the singers that they were going to need in the future on the main stage.
Wow.
So Bill Nix, thank him very much, hired me as the resident designer of the Metropolitan Opera Studio.
He hired you to do what? The what?
As the designer
Designer for?
for the Metropolitan Opera Studio.
All right.
And these were full productions of operas
Mm-hmm.
that toured with the singers that they were training, then to move along to the main stage at the Met.
Wow.
And I've done other things on the main stage at the Met that were not Metropolitan Opera pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I did the 50th anniversary of American Ballet Theater, which had all those dancers from the year one and film and everything. And so a lot of what I have designed for Alvin Ailey or other production companies have appeared on all these stages all over the place. Alvin Ailey especially on their tours. So my work has sort of been scattered all over the place. The interesting thing about my name on the program is nobody really knows really what I do in the audience. So, and it doesn't matter, as long as it turns out fine. So,
Well, talking of opera, and you talked about an opera that I hate to admit that I don't know a lot of things, but that's why I'm having you here. An opera called Regina, which is based upon The Little Foxes, which was actually in production with Mike Nichols, the famous film director, in over 100 productions. Tallulah Bankhead played the part of Regina in one of the original productions. But that is an opera that you could tell us something about what you think of the music in that. We're not going to play any of that music, but the music it was shocking and yet brilliantly, it was a breakthrough in every kind of way.
Well, it turns out for me, not being an authority on any of these things, that it was sort of one of the first sort of musically structured pieces where we could find atonal music starting to develop.
Like Stockhausen, yeah.
Right. And the thing I love about the opera, and I am by no means an authority on that opera or any others, was the drama, the character development. These nasty, sinister, greedy people, you can see them on stage and you can hear it in the music.
It's a Southern family that's involved in the cotton industry, is that right?
Correct.
And they're the heirs to be, that want to take what they can, and they're fighting like animals to get what they want, right?
Internally fighting with each other.
Yeah.
The husband and the wife and the uncles and the sons and all of these people are just vicious human beings who are really, and you see it so clearly in the music and in the character development. To the best of my knowledge, there's only one recording of that was done by the New York City Opera. And that's the recording certainly that I have. But I just love the music. I love the form that it offers to a designer. And I would love to design it one of these days if it ever comes up again. So,
well, now to come back to our home where we are now, you and I both have chosen to live here, and we were talking about why we had decided, well, we are here, and we found it fascinating why we are discovering that we're here. There are other people doing all kinds of things. I believe that there is a kind of renaissance, a kind of rebirth, a reawakening to, well, this program itself, this radio station itself is a kind of Renaissance in action.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the people in the Pine Bluff arena and the theater there. What is it going on there? Is it more having to do with the Martha Mitchell productions that were put on there, or
Well,
what's going on over there?
There is a producer who has the resources to do what he's doing, who has been renovating some of the theaters there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just done all the new stage systems and the interior design for what is called the community theater, which is not a community theater. That was the original name of the movie house
Oh,
that was there. It was
yes.
it was an old dime store building,
I saw that.
and in the 20s, they turned it into a movie theater,
Mm-hmm.
and then it lay dormant for a long time. And Jack's wife, Kathy, who was instrumental in saving the Sanger, that great big theater over there, saved this theater. And so they've now finished putting it back together for live performance. And Kathy and Jack were very good friends with Martha Mitchell when she was alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so they chose to produce a play at the Art Center that had been written by, I think, one of Martha's original boyfriends long time ago.
Well, I performed in a play about Martha Mitchell in 2004 when I came back.
Yeah.
And I was also working as a dialogue coach, helping the young people to not sound as if they were just from
Yep.
Pine Bluff, but to sound as if they were average Americans from just
Sure,
about anywhere.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so interesting, her story,
Well,
and what we're finding out now.
and so much of the Spanish say la verdad saldrá al sol. Everything, the truth, always comes out in the sunlight, and the sunlight is shining bright here, and
Sure.
things are coming out.
Right.
Why are you particularly happy with? Would you care to rhapsodize somewhat about Hot Springs, about what you like about Hot Springs? We were
Well,
talking about the crystals in Lake Ouachita and the.
I think that there is an energy here,
Mhm.
and I will tell you a couple of instances as briefly as I can. I came to Jesseville to visit my nephew and his wife on their farm.
Jesseville, north of here.
Yeah. And as I was coming back to go to the airport to fly back to New York, I passed a big Victorian house.
Mhm.
And we turned off to take a look at it on Magnolia Street.
Mhm.
And I thought to myself, I'm a very adventuresome person. And I thought to myself, I have never owned a house.
You're a very what kind of person?
Adventuresome.
Adventuresome. All right.
So I said, I've never owned a house.
Right.
So why don't I buy a house and see what it's like? So I saw this house, 12-room Victorian house, and I went back to New York. I subsequently bought it, which is another story.
Mm-hmm.
So I now owned a house in Hot Springs and a place I would love to be. And so that got me here on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And then one time I bought was running around with Benini, the artist,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and bought a big oak table. And we put it in Benini's van,
Mm-hmm.
brought it to my house, but there was no time to get it through the back door into my kitchen. So he said, I will call somebody to come help you get it through the back door into your kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
So I was standing there under the carport with my big oak table. Up comes a little Volkswagen Beetle. Out of the Beetle gets a woman who's about 5 foot tall. She walks up to the carport. She says, my name is Melinda. I'm the mayor of Hot Springs, and I'm here to help you carry your table into the house.
Wonderful.
So that charm and that friendliness
Amazing. And I'm the mayor.
and has never failed me here in
Well,
Hot Springs.
the current mayor, Ruth, is also a person of great charm, and I would
Yeah.
hope to have her on the program sometime.
Yeah.
Well, this has been sort of the way with me, too. I arrived, and my nephew took me to meet his roommate from college, who is now a lawyer here, Gary Sammons, down in Treasure Isle Road. And they'd been they'd been roommates up at here in Arkansas. I just went blank on the name of the school, college, university, very good. And as we were driving back, I saw this house, and it was for sale, and I said, let's stop here. We went inside, and he said, Uncle Ben, this is your house. I said, one second. And the next morning, I made a bid on it. They made a counter bid, and I bought it.
Yep.
And I came back here, and I didn't have any employment. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was offered employment at University of Arkansas in Little Rock, and Benton, Pulaski Tech, National Park, and what used to be called Ouachita Tech. And at one time, I was teaching in 5 different colleges at the same time.
Oh, my.
Driving, so I bought a big Thunderbird, the replica. I was driving 5,500 miles a month. Perfect.
Holy cow.
And that was my fascination. I got involved with the prisons,
Yeah.
and then I built some halfway houses to help people who come out of the prisons.
Yeah.
And it's just been, for me, a song and dance, and meeting people like you and getting this program. I'm going to see if I can get this Renaissance music back on. It's coming on.
Yep.
going to say goodbye to you now. We've had a wonderful session with Milton Duke, and next week we'll have Deborah Carroll, and we're going to we've talked to a Renaissance man today, and this will be a Renaissance woman. I call her a latter-day Eleanor of Aquitaine, and we're going to keep on talking to all of the people who are here doing the wonderful things in the arts. This is Big Ben and Company, Everything Sometimes.